Let me welcome everyone here tonight to our last chapter of the book of Ezekiel. And I hope that it's been a pretty good study for you. I know I found out more about Ezekiel and all of that, all that he did, more than I ever knew before. And so it's been a good study for me personally, and I hope y'all have liked it. Let's go ahead and begin with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay, as we start out, I do my normal introduction. My name is Steve Sheik, and I'm the congregation leader at Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Katy, Texas. And so let's go ahead and begin. Like I said, our last stop here, we're on the timeline here with Ezekiel. Notice that Daniel's got another 30 years or so to go. He lasted a very, very long time in captivity, and so Jeremiah has already been dispatched, and so we see that Ezekiel. I'll talk about Ezekiel and how he passed a little bit later on as we. Now, these are the names of the tribes. Dan's portion will be from the northern frontier beside the way of Hethlon to the entrance of Hamath, Hazar Enan in the northern border of Damascus beside Hamath, and from eastern side to the sea. Next to the territory of Dan from the east side to the west will be Asher's one. Next to the territory of Asher from the east side to the west will be Naphtali's one. Next to the territory of Manasseh will be from the east side to the west will be Ephraim's one. And I missed a verse in there from Naphtali to Manasseh, but next to the territory of Ephraim, from the east side to the west will be Reuben's one, and next to the territory of Reuben will, from the east to the west, will be Judah's one. All right, so I got seven of them in there. The tribe of Dan was to receive the northernmost section of the promised land. The order of the tribes from north to south, and north of the sacred district there was Dan, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Reuben, and Judah. So 7 tribal allotments of equal size from north to south anyway. And since they would be equal size, though, and since the east-west width of the promised land would vary depending on the latitude of each allotment, it would seem like that the north-south distance would also vary somewhat. Now, what I did today was pick up several estimations by various scholars as to what the estimated boundaries would look like. And this one is not too, these two are not too different, but then we get into some other ones here. And these, you know, the one of them, it clearly says just from around Damascus, the northern portion will be right around here in Damascus. And yet, then they for some reason, this particular person had drawn it up way up here into Asia, Turkey area, and down here to the Nile River. And of course, we've talked about when it talks about the river of Egypt, they're talking about the little stream right down in this area right here. And then here's another one that I found that they stretch it way over to the east, And so that one's obviously an old map that somebody came up with, but they also have the borders of Israel going all the way up to the Euphrates area there. And so we've got and you know, they're down here to the Nile River too, and it stretches. Some of these old maps like that, they'll stretch all the way over to the you know, all the way across Saudi Arabia, which I don't see that as being anywhere in the Bible that it's going to be from there. So anyway, just as a comparison, then these tribes here are these divisions for the tribes. I'll compare those. You see the ones that I think are a little bit more accurate here. This one here is from the study that I used mostly, and then this one is very similar to it. Then the ones that are a little bit out of I think they're totally wrong because they're too far south and too far north. And here, though, was the division of the land from Joshua. If you look in the book of Joshua, here's what the land looked like. They're in the divisions of the land. And you remember that we had 3 tribes that took land on the east side of the Jordan River, and and then Simeon down here, which had been prophesied that they're just basically going to dissolve and not be a real entity anywhere. They're totally landlocked by Judah, and then Benjamin here, real tiny little strip of land there. These lands here were divided up based on the population of the tribes at the time that they entered into Canaan after the Exodus. So that's how they got divided up, and basically if the tribe was big enough and bad enough, they could go ahead and conquer what they wanted to conquer, and that was their land. And now, though, we're looking back at these divisions, and it looks like it may be more of an equitable division. And this particular author here had these parallel lines here that you know, they're a little bit different. Reuben is you know, wider than Judah and so forth, and you can tell that there's a difference in the east-west boundaries there, where, you know, how far north or south they went, and so anyway, that's a division, and nobody, you know, all of the different authors. I mean, my goodness, I was looking at these things today, and it just doesn't seem like that there were many more drawings, and they were all, you know, kind of all over the place. So the Bible doesn't really give us a real good answer, and, you know, doesn't give a Latin long for the for where these boundaries are going to be. So, you know, we really don't know. A lot of it is just our best guess. And so the order of the tribes doesn't conform to anything else that we see in Scripture. Now, the tribal allotments, certainly you see from the drawings that we had, they're not like any of those that Joshua assigned, nor really are they as large. So if you look at the tribes, there's a general progression from the most unfaithful tribe, which was Dan, to the most faithful, which was Judah. Judah is from, you know, the Messiah comes from Judah. and he's he receives the blessing of being adjacent to the holy allotment. All right, he's the one that tribe of Judah is right there on the north side of the holy allotment. And then the tribes that descended from Jacob's concubines, Dan, Asher, Naphtali, and Gad, they received land to the far north and the far south. Dan, Asher, and Naphtali are in the north, and then Gad is all the way down in the south. And so those that descended from Jacob's wives, then they received land that was toward the center of the land. You know, they were closer to that holy land. All right. Any comments or questions on that? All right.
I have just a thing about the maps. I think I understand why some of the maps extend so far out, because in Joshua 1, it says that God declared that all the land from the desert and the Lebanon to the great river, the Euphrates, all that land would be part of Israel. It also says that in I believe it's in Exodus 23, where it says, "I will set your boundaries from the sea, from the Sea of Suf, the Red Sea, and the Sea of Palestine, all the way over to the Euphrates." So I think what probably is happening there, you're seeing those lines extend all the way out to the east. I think that's probably scholars who are trying to reconcile that with the declared borders of what Israel would be.
Yeah, it is, and I understand where they're coming from on some of it, but then again, when it came right down to it, the children of Israel never ever accomplished what God had given them. They stopped short. They never took their land, and you know, I admit that there in Joshua, it says all the way up to the Euphrates, but they never took any of that. They stopped right there at the Lebanon, and then the southern border, of course, was that Wadi al whatever, and I can't ever remember the name, but that was called the River of Egypt, and when people in English-speaking areas they hear the River of Egypt, well, what do we think of? We think of the Nile. But for the ancient people, that River of Egypt was a dry riverbed that would sometimes have water in it if they had a lot of rains. But it was the pretty much understood boundary between Egypt and the whatever, you know, was north of that. And so, yeah, it's you look at those things, and it's interesting to see, interesting to watch it, but I think you know, certainly not something that I'm prepared to wrestle with somebody over what those boundaries would be. If they're bigger, good on them. If it's but you know, those areas have typically, the Lord said, you know, you leave the Edomites alone and all that stuff on the west side of the Dead Sea and further south over there, you leave them alone. And he did grant them the land up there east of the Jordan, where you know, where Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh were, these areas. Why? Because those territories attacked Israel. They had no blood relation to Israel, and so when they attacked them, Israel defeated all of them, and therefore, by right of warfare, that became their land, kind of like the Golan Heights are today. They were attacked, and Israel won. And so, therefore, that land is Israel's now today, or I think it is anyway. I know that the UN and most of the world thinks otherwise, but they have a right to be wrong. All right. Let's go ahead. By by Judah's border from the east side to the west will be the contribution, which you will set aside 25,000 cubits in width and in length, like one of the portions from the east side to the west. The sanctuary will be in the midst of it. The allotment that you are to set apart to Adonai will be 25,000 in length and 10,000 in width. The holy allotment will be a portion for these, for the Kohanim. Toward the north, it will be 25 cubits, and toward the west, 10,000 in width. Toward the east, 10,000 in width, and toward the south, 25,000 in length. Adonai's sanctuary will be in the midst of it. The sanctified portion will be for the Kohanim of the sons of Zadok, who kept my charge and did not go astray as the Levites went astray when Bnei Israel went astray. It will be for them a portion set apart from the offering of the land, most holy by the border of the Levites. All right, so south of the Judah's portion would be this special territory that we've talked about. We went through this a good bit on, I think, in chapter 46. And so it would be Judah's portion, of course, would be the same as the other tribal allotments. And but now this that we're talking about here is a section of 25,000 cubits, which is about 8.3 miles wide, and the temple sanctuary would stand right in the middle of it. And this portion would be 25,000 cubits long from east to west, and 10,000 cubits, or about 3.3 miles wide from north to south. And so this area would be for the descendants of the Zadokite priests who remain faithful to the Lord. So this would be a most holy place next to the territory for the other Levitical priests. Now, going back to this, so this is what we're talking about here. This land right here, 25,000 by 10,000. And then the non-Zedekite Levites, they would have also a land that was 25,000 cubits by 10,000 cubits. And then, of course, you see the temple right directly in the middle of that. And then further south, we'll see that there's the city. He just calls it the city. And so let's go ahead and look at these verses here. Alongside the border of the Kohanim, the Levites will have 25,000 in length and 10,000 in width. The entire length will be 25,000, width 10,000. They must not sell or exchange any of it or transfer the choice portion of the land, for it is holy to Adonai. So the other Levitical priests, they would have that allotment that we've talked about there, and it's the same size as the allotment of the Zedekite priests. They were not to sell it or exchange it in any way, because why? It didn't belong to them. That's holy ground. It was land that God Himself had set apart, and so it becomes holy. No man can then come in there and take it over. So that's pretty straightforward. Going ahead in verse 15, it said the 5,000 that remain in the width in front of the 25,000 will be for a common use for the city, for living, for pasture land, for the city will be in the midst of it, and will have these measurements: the north side 4,500, the south side 4,500, the east side 4,500, and the west side 4,500. So the city will have open land toward the north, 250, toward the south 250. We're talking about cubits here, and toward the east 250, and then toward the west 250. So the remainder of the length, according to the holy allotment, will be 10,000 east and 10,000 west. It will be alongside the holy allotments it will be alongside the holy allotment. Its produce will be food for those who serve the city. Those who serve the city will, those who serve the city out of all the tribes of Israel will till it. All right, so the remaining portion of this allotment is a section that's about 8.3 miles wide and 5,000 cubits, about 1.7 miles north to south. And that would be for the holy city and the open spaces beside it. The city itself would actually, occupy the very central portion of this section, and it would be for the common use of the Israelites. As you know, it would be open spaces and home sites, and the city itself would be about 1.5 miles on each side, and it would have like 416 feet, 8 inches, almost 417 feet of an open border all the way around it, kind of like a green belt that would be like around the temple complex. And so there would be a 3.3 mile agricultural area to the east and the west sides of the city that would be used for the production of food for those who lived in the city. Those who lived in the city from all the tribes, or whoever lived in the city, then would cultivate those fields. And you think about, well, that's not a whole lot when you think about 3.3 miles. And yet, if you've ever been to Israel, you can look out there and you can see areas where they're growing things under these massive greenhouses, and the production rate is just extremely high. They can control the climate in there. They can control the moisture, and so it's easy for me to understand how that these people could go in there and they could grow things that would certainly feed all of that city, and then probably with enough to export it and make money from that too. It's amazing what the land today can do if it just has some water. Now, and then of course, in the future, God said he was going to change the landscape a bit. There will be earthquakes, and the mountains would fall into the valleys, and the valleys would fill up. And so a lot of that stuff, instead of being up and down like that, like it is today, maybe pretty well flattened out, and would be just ripe for growing things in greenhouses. And if it didn't, it's still just in the ground. Well, the Israelis do very, very well with that also. They're what would you say, they invented some of the finest desalination technology that there is today, and then of course they are the experts in drip irrigation and the very frugal use of water. They do an excellent job of that. So to me, it was easy enough. This part there, when I read about they're going to have that agricultural area on the east and the west side, well, you know what, that just got my attention, of course, and because those are the things that I like to look at and study. So, all right. Again, anybody wants a comment, just jump in there. The whole allotment will be 25,000 by 25,000 square. You will set apart the holy allotment with the property of the city. Now, the total holy allotment would be 25,000 cubits, or 8.3 miles. And it would be 8.3 miles on a square. And that would include the city, all the adjacent lands, as well as the territories for the Levites and the Zadokites. Now, this is an area that turns out to be, I calculated it up, and it was almost 69 square miles. Now, how big is 69 square miles? Well, I plotted out 69 square miles. And for those of you who live in the Houston area, and just looking on here, you know, there's quite a few of you here. But there around Houston, there we have a loop. It's called the 610 loop. And this 69 square miles would fit pretty much inside that 610 loop, with not a whole lot to spare outside of that. So you know, it's a good amount of land. I didn't calculate how many acres that would be, but somebody with a calculator can go ahead and do that while I'm talking. But 69 square miles, however many acres that would be, it would be a lot. And so that kind of gives you an idea, though, of what the size of this holy area of Jerusalem, or of Israel, would be. Now, that's well, let's go ahead and go on. It says, what is remaining from this side and on the other of the holy allotment and the city property will be for the prince. What is adjacent to the 25,000 of the allotment toward the eastern border, and westward adjacent to the 25,000 to the western border, alongside the portions, will be for the prince. The holy allotment and the sanctuary of the house will be in the midst of it. The property of the Levites and the property of the city will be in the middle of what belongs to the prince, and what belongs to the prince will be between Judah's border and Benjamin's border. So the and here I got the picture out there again, kind of, so we can just kind of keep seeing it. The prince would receive the rest of that, all of this area over here, and going east, in this area here that extends all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Well, that's what the prince would have. And remember, the Bible says that God is giving that area to the prince, so that he wouldn't be going out and grabbing other land from all of the other people. So, all right, now, yeah, here we got two of them, and both of them agree. So in the presence of two witnesses, we can agree to this. Okay, Leonard and Rich both came up with 44,160 acres. And that's a pretty good, that'd be a pretty good sized ranch, I'm telling you. And so I think yeah,
is that is that like from the Astrodome, the 610 loop there? Is that like from the Astrodome all the way downtown to the Heights area and back around to the
610?
Memorial?
Yes. Yeah, that's where the Astrodome is on 610, and that's the one that wraps around Houston. That was the first one that they built around Houston, and then
all that in there.
We had Beltway 8 around that, and then we have now we have 99 around that. So and then that just kind of goes to show you that the city of Houston is 2 miles or is 2 hours from the city of Houston. It takes, for those of you that don't know, it takes almost 2 hours to get from the west side of Houston all the way through to the east side, and that's if the traffic is good. So it's it's quite spread out. It's quite a big city. So not the most populous, of course, no, but we just don't build up that much. We just build out. And so, but that's kind of gives you an idea of what that, how that's going to be. This area right here that we're talking about, of just the silver area here, would be the area pretty much that is downtown Houston, but inside the 610 loop. And that's a pretty good chunk of land. And then of course the temple is much smaller, and the temple drawing that they've got here is not to scale. It would actually be much smaller than what would be in the land. But somebody had already drawn this up, and I didn't. I'm not going to go in there and try to fix it because I don't have those skills. All right, so let's go ahead. As for the rest of the tribes from the east side to the west will be Benjamin's one. Okay, that's from the south side. Okay, next to the territory of Benjamin from the east to the side to the west will be Simon's one. Next to the territory of Simeon from the east side to the west will be Issachar's one. Next to the territory of Issachar from the east side to the west will be Zebulun's one. Next to the territory of Zebulun from the east side to the west will be Gad's one. And next to the territory of Gad to the south side southward, the border will be from Tamar to the waters of Mirabat Kadesh to the Wadi, to the Great Sea. That Wadi that they're talking about, that's that Egypt, the river of Egypt. And this is the land that you will divide by lot to the tribes of Israel as an inheritance, and these are their portions. It is a declaration of Adonai. So, the tribal allotments, that of course they'll fall to Benjamin, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, and Gad. This finishes out the distribution of the land to all of the tribes. Now, the tribe of Benjamin received land next to the holy allotment. Judah was to the north, Benjamin to the south, possibly because Benjamin was one of Rachel's sons, or because the Benjamites supported David. If you look back in 2 Samuel, somewhere around 2 Samuel 19 or something, when David was having some of his difficulties, and so they were allied with Judah to form the southern kingdom. So, and also, if you remember that it was the tribe of Benjamin that Jerusalem was totally encapsulated in the tribe of Benjamin, and then of course Judah was around that. So getting close here. These are the exits of the city on the north side, 4,500 by measure. It will be the gates of the city named after the tribes of Israel. 3 gates northward, the Reuben gate, the Judah gate, 1, the Levi gate, 1. At the east side, 4,500, will be 3 gates. The Joseph gate, 1, the Benjamin gate, 1, and the Dan gate, 1. To the south side, 4,500 by measure will be 3 gates, the Simeon gate, the Issachar gate, the Zebulun gate. At the west side, 4,500 with their 3 gates, Gad gate, the Asher gate, and the Naphtali gate. And so that's finishing that out. So the Lord specified that the gates of the holy, specified these particular gates of the holy city. And Ezekiel, strangely enough, Ezekiel did not name the city. He didn't give it a name, but Zechariah did. And he described it. We know it's the same city because I think in the next slide, yeah. In that day, waters will flow from Jerusalem, half toward the eastern sea and half toward the western sea, both in the winter and the summer and the winter. All right, so that is the same description that we've read about earlier, that Ezekiel described the water coming from Jerusalem, half going to the west into the Med, and the other half going east into the Dead Sea. So it went from the Med to the Dead. All right, and so here's some. It's interesting. I mean, even with this, there's some differences. You'll see up here Reuben, Judah, and Levi. And now I'm just wondering, they have these names. They tell, okay, the tribes, we're going to honor the tribes of Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Judah, the kingly tribe, and Levi, the priestly tribe. All right. Now, all three of these patriarchs were Leah's son, and Leah's sons. But my question would be, in Hebrew, we read from right to left. So would it be that Reuben would be here and Levi would be here? I don't know. It doesn't tell us. And so the west gates would bear the names of Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. These three, they were all sons of the handmaidens that they were born through the surrogate mothers of Zilpah and Bilhah. Now, this many gates, all these 12 gates, would indicate that Jerusalem would be an open city and that people could come and go as they needed to. But it's just interesting how that they came out to both of these down at the bottom again. When you're reading, would you read from right to left, or and up here? And so these Levi and Reuben would be switched, and down here Simeon and Zebulun would be switched. We don't know. Dr. Fruchtenbaum had this one. That was his idea. And then I don't know who drew this one up, but again, it's not something. It's just one of those things that make you want to go, not something that we'd want to squabble about. And the New Jerusalem in the eternal state after the millennium, it will also have 3 gates on each of its 4 sides, each one named for the 12 sons of Jacob. Now that city will also be square, but it will either be a cube or a pyramid. And the Bible is not totally 100% clear on that. I've always been taught that it would be a cube that was 1,500 miles on each side. So yeah. In the new heavens and new earth and the new Jerusalem, it's going to be just huge. And I've seen some calculations that people do that if every person that ever lived in the world, that was ever alive in the world, whoever that person would be, if they counted all of those billions and billions of people and put them in that city, that everybody could still have a house that would be about the 3,000 square feet. And, given that, one story, you'd have about 15 feet between the different ones. That's way too much math for me to try to figure out. So, but it's, I think it would, it will be the eternal city there. It's going to be similar to, but not identical to, the millennial city. All right.
Well, I was wondering about that. Like, how much space is anybody going to have? How many people could fit in there and all that? So you answered that for me. That gives me an idea.
Well, and that's what I was getting at on that one. That's for people that, for all the people that had ever lived. That's not an estimation, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
You have to mute.
Actually, another thing is the fact that you have so many gates says something very interesting about the city, because if you look at a city, normally any city that wanted to be defended, it would have as few gates as possible. The fact that there is a gate for every tribe, not only is this an open city, but this is a very secure city because God is there. So his presence is there, and it's going to be totally secure and totally safe.
Absolutely. Yeah, they won't have to worry about defunding the police because God is going to be the policeman. Karen, you had your mic open.
Yeah, I had the thing about it was, I was going to say that new. Let me mute that one. Okay, there we go. The new kingdom is 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles. It's 1,500 miles square by 1,500 miles high, according to the measurements.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, then we're all living in the new kingdom, or the new Jerusalem, excuse me.
It's going to be a lot of folks in that thing. And okay, so how are you going to have a city that's 1,500 miles high? Well, you know what?
That's because
God built all of the universe.
Not the earth anymore. It's the new earth. And that new earth, I believe, takes up almost probably about half of the universe. I don't know,
but it would. It's certainly we can't even wrap our hands around that. I mean, it's going to be huge. It's going to be great, and I'm just. It's just going to be something to look forward to. It really will be. So now. Yeah, and Zechariah, I read that one already. Finally, the final verse here said, it will be 18,000 cubits all around. From that day on, the name of the city will be Adonai is there. Or, let's see.
Adonai Shema.
Huh?
Adonai Shema.
Yeah,
Adonai. Or Yahweh Shema.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And although I'm one of those hard-headed guys that I do not try to pronounce the name, so I will say Hashem or Adonai Shama. And the new name would indicate a new character a new character in that. Namely, that the Lord would forever reside among his people. So that's a new name. He doesn't have that kind of name anywhere else in the Bible, and so that Adonai Shama would mean that he's always with us from then on. So the Lord never will never again depart from his people or send them out of his land. He will dwell forever with them, and they will forever enjoy the unbroken fellowship with God that he had intended all along from the creation of the world. So the book of Ezekiel ends with a description of the New Jerusalem, as do the books of Isaiah and Revelation, though the New Jerusalem in Ezekiel is millennial, and the New Jerusalem in the end of Revelation is eternal. So there's, so here we go, 22 years earlier and 48 chapters earlier, Ezekiel began his book with a vision of a storm appearing, and a storm picturing the destruction of the old Jerusalem, and later God's departure from it, And then I think that's in, if I can remember, chapter 10, I believe. And he ended it then with another vision of the establishment of the New Jerusalem and God's permanent residence there. So the glory of the Lord is the unifying feature that ties all of this stuff together, and it runs from the beginning to the end. And so Ezekiel begins and ends with God. Between the great vision of God, the wheels within the wheels and the fiery chariot, that whole vision of the throne of God, with the wheels and the seraphim and all that kind of stuff, and these closing words that he finished off, the Lord is there. That's so. It's a record of man's failure and sin, judged by God, but then his judgment works to God's glory, and the book ends with one thing that makes heaven what it is, and that is the presence of God. So I just wanted to finish this off today, where it's a little bit early, I know. The Ezekiel, he was a son of Buzi, and he was a priest. He was from the priestly tribe. We know all of that. And the chief of the Jews, who was in the land there in Babylon, killed Ezekiel because Ezekiel rebuked him for worshiping idols. And so, he got angry with Ezekiel because he spoke the truth, and then he killed him. And of course, this is not in the Bible. This is extra biblical. But he's buried in the grave of Arphaxad, the son of Shem, the son of Noah. Again, that's maybe a little bit tenuous, but here is a Jewish prophet inside this Muslim mosque in Iraq. This is over in Iraq. And so this is what it looks like inside there. And so that's, I just kind of wanted to finish that off with letting you know what happened with Ezekiel. He was killed. He didn't live to be very, very old there. So he was he was in his 50s when he was killed. And so that pretty much ends our, oh my goodness, how many months study of Ezekiel. And now